name is Rita Weeb, and welcome to our next in the series of Aging with Attitude. I hope you've been enjoying the past episodes, and with us today we have a couple of guests. Basically, they'll talk about anything. Today is our socially taboo talk about discussion day. So for an brief introduction, I want to introduce Darrell Hubble from Hubble Goldsmiths and Maureen Kawinski. She's actually a pharmacist from PharmaSave. And we want to talk about several different things. Now, some of them may be mentioned, some not. Some of those socially taboo type things may be things about cannabis. They may be about the industry of incontinence. They may be about ageism. They may be about a whole lot of different things. So, there's addictions out there. There's suicides. There's assisted dying. So those are just a few of the topics that we may get a chance to touch on today. So I'll just throw those topics out there to our guests and see who may like to talk about what first. So Maureen, do you have a preference of what you might like to talk about?
Actually, I think suicide would be one of my topics. Do you want me to just go ahead?
Yeah, you just go ahead.
Excellent. Statistically, and I am not going to be an expert on the numbers, but I know statistically, men over 50 are much more likely to actually complete a suicide. Statistically, they are a very high-risk group. And I think that's appalling in many ways when you think now you've gotten to the prime of your life. You've got all of these things that should be working for you, and you don't have the support systems in place for yourself. You don't know how to reach out to those support systems. And I don't know if they are more apt to attempt, but they are definitely statistically the highest completions of suicide.
That's very interesting statistics, Maureen. And you're actually on a board of directors
of the Crisis Center of Northern BC.
Right. Okay. Interesting. So with that, I'll turn it over to Darrell, and just any of those thoughts about.
Well, I'll actually stick with that because when I was 17, my older brother shot himself and committed suicide, and he was just about 20. And a few years ago, my nephew committed suicide at 25. And I don't know about the gender basis of it, but I do know that both of these people, my brother and my nephew, had issues that they couldn't resolve, and you can only stuff those issues a certain length of time before they become big enough for their
mental health issues.
Absolutely.
And I think mental health issues in this province, or perhaps in this country, aren't given the credence that they maybe need to have given to them. Because it's certainly a stigma. Yeah. I'm depressed, I'm on antidepressants, oh my goodness, what's wrong with you? That's something that we see every day. And in reality, I mean, I sell just as much antidepressants as I do antibiotics, if not more.
Well, and I think antidepressants might be more effective
for depression than an antibiotic.
Well, yeah, but antibiotics, they have their own health issues, right? Where you're killing your biota, and that's why they're called antibiotics. But relieving somebody of depression can't be a bad thing.
No.
So if we move on into some of these other type of things that may be the cause, what about hormonal changes in men and or women? What about addictions? Some of those type of issues. Any of you familiar with those?
Well, I've had hormonal changes induced by a doctor, because for the past year and a bit ago, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer, and the first treatment, and the treatments are going really well and everything is good, but the first thing is a hormone blocker to eliminate the testosterone, because prostate cancer lives on testosterone. And so the side effects of having diminished testosterone are somewhat similar to menopause. There's mood swings and there's weight gain. And I blame the hormones for that, but it was probably the ice cream. But lots of men grow breasts when this happens, and I got to understand sort of from the inside what happens when women go through menopause. And well, actually, all through life, women have the hormonal changes that men tend not to have in the same fluctuation. And I developed a whole new sympathy, or empathy, I suppose, for what happens, right? Because I had times when I would be sitting there and trying to look at a question, but the part of me that was focused on the question was little, and the part of me that was being, overwhelmed by a tsunami of emotions was big, and I'm like, where's this coming from? What's this happening, right? But thankfully, it's for me. I had my last hormone treatment in December, and so somewhere along the way, I should gain back the amount of testosterone that I had, and but it was quite a trip.
So Darrell, I mean, just talking about these cancers below the belt, or so to say, do you find there's enough support out there for men and or women going through these kinds of things?
Well, I don't know about women. A lot of men don't want to talk about this in the least whatsoever, right? For myself, I mean, the body is essentially a mechanical device, and it has things that break down in it. And in my particular case, it was the prostate. Thankfully, the cancer was caught in time. It was very aggressive, but it caught in time. And my oncologist told me that I have his worst case scenario is I have another 10 years, right? So that's good. But I've talked to a lot of men about it, and the actual thing that surprised me is almost universally the thing they ask me is, what are the symptoms? So I'm 62, you got a target market of people who are 55 to 65 or 70, people that I know, and they don't know what would be a symptom of prostate cancer, and I didn't know. I just thought that it was normal aging. It became more difficult to get an erection, and things like this didn't work quite the same as they used to, and I just thought, well, you're 60, this will happen. But had somebody told me, or if I had gone and checked and found out what the symptoms were, what I should be looking for, I would have been initiating the process of getting to a specialist much earlier.
Sooner.
Even the PSA number, which is the prostate specific antigen, I didn't know when I first started getting a PSA test at 55. It was at, I think, 5, and then it kept marching upwards, and I had several GPs do rectal exams, and they all said the same thing: is that your prostate's a little bit swollen, but there's lots of reasons for it to be swollen, and so no big deal, and so I wasn't worried, even when my prostate PSA number was at 11, I didn't know that it was supposed to be 4 at the age of 60. I thought it's out of 100. Mm-hmm. And so from 5 to 11, what's the big? It's 10%, right? So I talk to as many men as I can and say, look, if get a PSA test done, if it's over 4, get another one, right? Pay attention to this.
Well, Darrell, I really appreciate you talking about this experience. That's one that, just another one of those conversations that should be had. I'm curious to know about the women's hormonal changes, cancers below the belt, anything. Do you know anything about that, Maureen?
Well, hormonally, certainly as women go through menopause, we have oodles of fluctuations in hormones, excuse me, which can cause any myriad of symptoms. I mean, we go through our life as we're menstruating. We have these myriad of symptoms as people experience PMS. Well, with menopause, you've got this shift in your hormones that has so many different effects. I mean, estrogen, which is what we have, our hormone as opposed to testosterone, is cardioprotective. So it protects your heart. Now, we get a drop in these hormones, or we get an imbalance in these hormones, we end up with all of these different symptoms. Now, certainly, we used to do the hormone replacement therapy with the Premarin and the Provera, standard estrogen progesterone combinations that in recent years we've found cancer links to. So we've tended to steer away from those, but that doesn't mean there's not other options. There's bioidentical hormones, which are hormones that are compounded that are the same as your hormones that you have in your body, so your body recognizes them the same, as opposed to the estrogens that we got from pregnant mare's urine, so an equine source, they were estrogens, but they didn't act in the same process as the others. So we have hormone treatments. You need to see your doctor. Most of the time, there's a lot of the doctors in town that don't do a lot of bioidentical hormones, but it's certainly something that you can research. And there's at least one doctor in town, and I don't know that I'm supposed to say his name, so I won't, that doctors will refer to that is specialized in that. And I mean, there's sleep deprivation and vaginal dryness and libido issues, all of those things.
To go on with some of our socially taboo topics. So amongst some of those type things are perhaps assisted dying, perhaps same-sex relationships, perhaps cannabis. Darrell, did you want to start out with talking with any about those kinds of things?
Well, I'll touch on cannabis. Now, I'm this rare child of I was born in 1956, but grew up in the 60s and the 70s, and never did drugs and just for my own reasons. But so I don't have any memories to go back to say this is what it was like. But my wife has arthritis, and it was very, very difficult. She had a lot of pain. She could hardly roll over in bed as she was at that, and she had a lot of very heavy-duty drugs that she was using, prescribed drugs, and she got a prescription for cannabis oil, and it was equal parts CBD and THC, and it was amazing. The inflammation went down. She started to sleep all night. She may watch this, so I can't say anything about how unpleasant pain makes people, but it does, right? I mean, like if you're in pain, that's all the time. It's really hard to maintain this nice sunshiny attitude about the world, and she's got that back. So I'm 100% supportive of that.
Wonderful.
And even if it didn't stop the pain, if it made her sleep for the night,
Absolutely.
You're waking up refreshed.
Yeah,
which is a huge difference as well to your day.
So did you want to expand on any of those topics, cannabis, any of those other ones we talked about?
Oh, if we want to talk about cannabis, I mean, there's the whole medical marijuana, which is a different stream than the recreational marijuana. However, I know people are using the recreational stream of marijuana for medical use. They have been using it for medical use even when it wasn't legal. So the marijuana industry is we'll see how it all pans out. It's not the be all and end all for everything. And when you're doing the oils, CBD is the one that's going to help with pain. Mm-hmm. THC is the one that gives you the euphoria that you would get from smoking a joint. So you need to balance that with what you've got to do and what your symptoms are, and very, very patient specific. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what else do we have?
So you work in a drugstore, you work at a pharmacy, you probably see and hear all kinds of things that are, probably important in that 45 to 64 year age range, changes people are going through. Just, the new way of looking at things. I noticed that the advertising industry is really capitalizing on these adult tens and diapers and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And I'm told that by a doctor that incontinence issue can actually be fixed. But
it can't for everybody, but there are surgical procedures that urologists can do. I mean, and I am certainly not an expert on the surgical procedures. However, when we think about incontinence, it's not nearly as predominant as it used to be, but the 65 plus ladies that you would see in the feminine protection aisle picking up panty liners or always pads that are not designed for urinary incontinence. They're just the wrong product. And you try to politely steer them over the other way and get these other incontinence products. It's just a completely different absorbency. They don't work unless you get the proper product. And then the other piece is, I mean, when you speak back to the prostate cancer, a lot of men, I mean, invariably all of them that end up with surgical intervention and something like that, need incontinence pads. And they make them specifically for men. Men's incontinence, it flows from a different angle, and they have different incontinence pads. So you need to really feel it's not an issue to buy this stuff. It's much more of an issue to have an accident when you're wandering around the mall than to be purchasing the incontinence pads and getting the right product for you.
Mm-hmm. So anything else that you can think of that maybe we should be talking about, or from either one of you that maybe we haven't touched on yet?
Well, you mentioned doctor-assisted death, and I would say that if I have doctor-assisted death, I hope it's on purpose.
Okay.
That I was aware that was happening. But I seriously, I think that it's a wonderful thing.
To have that option.
To have the option. My parents are both passed away. My dad lived to 84 and died of cancer, and Mom lived to 82 and died, but and she had dementia. But between hospice and doctor-assisted death, we've come miles in the last while. You know, my dad died in hospice. It was incredibly good, and he would not have chosen to die any sooner. But I've seen other people who died with far less grace, in far more pain, and where it would have been, if it was me in that position, I would like to have the option to say, I want it to be over. I want it to be done.
And there is definitely a lot of protocols in place that we're not looking at euthanasia. Euthanasia is a whole other conversation. Yeah. We're looking at people being able to make that conscious choice when they are still able. Yeah. And there are a lot of checks and balances to make sure that that is done appropriately. But when you look at, and I'm flipping this to something completely different, when you say you've seen people that have died not as gracefully with lots of pain, back in the day, because I've been a pharmacist in this city for 32 years, and I was actually thinking about that on the way here, my goodness. And there was a time when we would not give morphine to a dying cancer patient because we didn't want them to be addicted. That was the concept. That was the concept. And we've switched, and as I've gone through this time span of this industry, I saw it switch to, I've got a hangnail. Oh, here, have some Demerol.
Yes.
And we're switching back again. So to limiting those narcotics, because in all honesty, we have a lot of people that are addicted to prescription medications. Yes. And we need to tone back on that or pull back on that, because we have created an industry where we've created drug addicts that are legitimate drug addicts. They're not out on the street getting things, but it's like the Valium of the 60s and 70s that every housewife had to have Valium. So we're pulling back on the narcotics for different things. I hope to see that we don't pull that back to the point where people are dying in pain.
Mm-hmm.
And I really thank you guys for talking about that. I just want to talk a little bit about my own experience too, and I thank you for bringing up the assisted dying perspective. I went through that journey with my son, who was 38 years old 2 years ago. And that's not a journey, and I would have to say that there's not a whole lot of supports out there at this point in time for a parent or anybody that has to go through this type of a thing, and the talking about death and the helping to plan it if that's what they wish. And it's not just about ourselves or our parents. Sometimes our children are needing that help. I mean, nobody expects a 38-year-old young man to get pancreatic cancer and and that's his only choice. But he was very, very happy that that choice was there for him. And as a parent, to walk through that journey with him, I was grateful to be a part of this new legislation in Canada that we can indeed do this.
That we've been given that option. Yeah.
Exactly. So, there's a number of different things out there that that we don't necessarily talk about. And this particular show is one of those things that we get a chance to talk about. Many people just sort of, finding a new self within, and it's okay. So
I think we sort of labor under the illusion that our life is unique, and yet when we talk to people and listen to people, everybody has their own stuff. Everybody's going through, might not be the identical stuff, but it's stuff with the equal import and equal drama to it and whatever. Everybody's got it, right? And I think that promoting talking about it instead of just clamming up and stuffing it down is a wonderful way to go.
perfect. Your thoughts on that, Maureen?
Well, it can be enlightening or cathartic depending on what you've been doing. I mean, if you have just been stuffing whatever it is inside, it's not healthy. Ultimately, it's not healthy, and it leads to all of those other things. I mean, we self-medicate. We drink too much. We eat the wrong foods. We do all of these things that we ought not to do that aren't healthy for us, but it's a way for us to keep everything bottled up. So, I mean, sometimes it's a matter of just talking, opening the conversation and talking, and it doesn't have to be with a professional. It may need to be with a professional, but you can have those conversations, and it's healthy. It's healthy to have those conversations, even if it is scary.
Yes, and it can be very scary, especially when you're kind of making that way for yourself out there, and you're trying to find somebody to talk about it, and nobody really will. And
you're worried about being judged.
Yes, judgment is a big thing. Worried that you're going to be shut down. Worried that you're going to be rejected. Through talking about some of these things.
I'm more like Alfred E. Newman from Mad Magazine. What? Me worry? I really find that almost everybody is willing to talk about almost anything if they feel safe.
Given the right environment.
Yeah, given the right environment. Yeah.
And there's a number of different support systems, either in existence or growing in existence out there. And all one basically needs to do is check it out. I mean, Maureen, you may be privy to some support systems that are out there, maybe associated with the whole suicide and families. I'm very much a family advocate when it comes to dealing with these kinds of things. And, it's just talking to people that may know. Your pharmacist may know, your doctor may know, other health professionals may know. That
And
whole
then-
peer group, the peer group, and talking about it as peers and just human beings is a very, very important thing.
And the suicide or the crisis center of Northern BC is actually an information line as well. So you can contact them and say, this is the kind of information I need, and they can send you to those resources as well. There's a lot of those resources. I mean, you can find, who are we kidding? Google it.
Yeah.
You have a website, Crisis Line?
Oh, crisis-center.
Well, I'm sure
I'd have to
it'll
look
be
it up.
it
Google
can
it.
be looked up, or any professional organization will be able to give you that. Okay, so I'd just like to thank our guests for joining us here today. Until next time, I'm Rita Weeb, and thank you for joining us.